The game to start Week 10 of the NFL regular season is kind of a big deal. The Baltimore Ravens welcome in the Cincinnati Bengals looking for the season sweep. These two exploded for 79 points in their Week 5 win that the Ravens won on the road in overtime. And both Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson coming in on all-time heaters. Will points be at a premium? Yeah! We'll break it down on the Pregame Powerup, and it starts now. Well, the Ravens are 3-1 in this building this season, and both teams are coming off a 41-point performance in Week 9, and both of these quarterbacks are playing maybe the best football of the season, and they will meet for the 7th time in their careers as we get set to break down everything you need to know about the AFC North showdown between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Pregame Power-Up on DraftKings Network, presented by Campbell's Chunky. It is soup that eats like a meal. Trey Wingo here with Claudia Bellafato. Also, we'll be joined by Emerson Latzia in Baltimore. Marshall Newhouse, the big man from TCU, will join us a little bit later on the show. Claudia, the numbers suggest this one could keep the scoreboard operator busy. Yeah. The line has been pretty solid, and that tells you something about what they expect tonight.
Yeah, third highest total we've seen this season. The highest total that hasn't been a Lions game, and that tells you a lot because of how explosive that Lions offense has been. As far as the movement on this, the total did open 49.5. It peaked at 53.5, came back down to 52 in the hook. Ravens opened 5.5, but it's been pretty much staying steady at 6. And 6, of course, important, not getting to that 7. There's going to be resistance because 7 is a key number. Now, I will say, if you're thinking about the Ravens, but you're not too sure about them covering the 6, a 6-point teaser certainly an option for you there. Bring it down to a pick 'em, pair them with another team. As far as injuries go, we will run through them, but off the top, we know for sure that left tackle Orlando Brown is out for the Bengals, won't face his former team. And of course, we'll keep you updated throughout the show on T. Higgins because that'll be a big one.
Absolutely. And by the way, just so people understand, that number 52.5, that's the highest total for a Thursday night game since the season opener last year between the Lions and the Chiefs. That one was 57, and they only scored 41 points in that game. I don't think 41 is going to do it tonight because, as we said, these quarterbacks have been playing great ball, including Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is coming off his second 5-touchdown pass performance of the season so far right now. He's in the top 5 in NFL completion percentage, pass yards, passing touchdowns, all of these things, and rating this season. He and Baker Mayfield, by the way, are the only two quarterbacks with a passer rating of over 100 and a losing record. So what's going on here? And don't expect the Ravens to have any luck containing Joe tonight. Baltimore, well, the last thing you want to hear about your pass defense are 3 letters. DFL. I'll put that in family terms. That's dead freaking last in the NFL when it comes to pass defense for the Baltimore Ravens. And you take a look at how these two quarterbacks have fared, averaging almost 2 touchdowns, over 300 yards, and 100 passer rating. Opposing quarterbacks, by the way, are 8-1 to the over for their passing yard props this season. Only quarterback not to cash the over was Bills quarterback Josh Allen. Now, the Ravens did make a move to try and improve that horrendous pass defense, sending a 7th-round pick to the Rams for cornerback Tre'Davious White. White has been a healthy scratch the last 4 games, but he is still a former first-round pick and a 2-time Pro Bowler and a first-time All-Pro when he was with the Bills. He hasn't quite been the same since he tore his ACL a couple of years ago. And White won't be able to help the Ravens tonight. He is not expected to suit up at all. Again, they just got him a couple of days ago. That would be asking a lot. So, what does this mean? This game certainly seems like it's more important to the Bengals than it does to the Ravens because, as I said, this would give Baltimore the season sweep, and both teams trail Pittsburgh in terms of wins and losses in the division, but the Bengals' playoff hopes really teetering, and the odds reflect that. Cincy is even money to make the playoffs at this point, plus 850 to win the division, and they're trying again to avoid that sweep for the season. For more on the importance of this one, let's send it out to Baltimore, where we find the one, the only Emerson Latzia.
Thank you very much, Trey. You know, if the Bengals really want to be considered true playoff contenders, they have to win this one. Thank God they have Smokin' Joe under center and those tasty-looking frosted tips on top of his head. He threw 5 touchdown passes last week. The Bengals have won 3 of their last 4 games, which means they have something important on their side: momentum.
Sunday was really positive. You know, our defense played great. Our great players played great. And that's what we're going to need going forward. We're going to need our great players to play up to their standard, and we're going to need everybody else to play great as well in their role and find ways to win games.
There's a lot of talent in this locker room. I think we've been talking about it all year, trying to put it together, which I think we did today. But we got to do it again, put it together again on Thursday night. I feel like this is probably our first game collectively that we played together and we fed off of each other. I feel like throughout the year we've had games where the offense has played well, we haven't played well, and then special teams has been in the mix there. And so I feel like this is our first complete game together that we played as a team.
I think that's how it's been phrased in here every week, that every loss is going to determine our season and every win is going to determine our season. I really fought back on that notion that we just take it one game at a time, and that's the mentality this group has had, and we're going to stick with it right now with where we're at in the season and just find a way to win this one and then look forward to the next week. So just try to keep it as tight as we can that way.
So the Bengals are humming along and can get back to 500 tonight with a victory, Trey. But on the other side, a Ravens victory would mean they have a 3-game gap in the division. Lamar Jackson is playing like he wants a 3rd MVP trophy. He is ready to put on a show tonight, something I saw him do plenty of during his high school days. So coming up, we'll take a trip down memory lane. You're going to really enjoy this one, I promise. Plus, a hard-hitting question I am asking Ravens fans. Would they trade Lamar Jackson if it guaranteed a Super Bowl victory for him this season? Very emotional answers are coming up. Back to you, Trey.
Emerson and I enjoy every single thing you do, let's be clear. We talked about some of the injuries, and it's certainly something that's an issue for the Bengals. The big one, T. Higgins, is likely going to be missing his 3rd straight game with that quad and hamstring injury. We don't have definitive word yet. When we do, we will let you know here on the Pregame Powerup. The team got some bad news on running back Zach Moss and tight end Eric All. They'll both likely to miss the rest of the season. Moss was placed on IR with that neck injury. We'll have to see a specialist, and All tore his ACL last week against the Raiders. The team did get some running back depth. They got veteran Khalil Herbert from the Bears for a 7th-round pick. He's expected to suit up tonight. But, Claudia, they're going to need to score points tonight because the Ravens and Lamar continue to just roll up the yards and tutties whenever they want them.
Yeah, and they're expected to score points. Everybody is tonight. Both teams have been, both coming off of 41-point performances in Week 9. And looking a little bit deeper into these trends, as we do on First and Trend, they have been all over it. The Ravens, one of the best teams, most profitable teams, cashing the over. They have done so in all but one of their 9 games. This matchup as well bodes well to the over. 7 of the 9 matchups between the two have gone over. And look at this one. Ravens defeated the Bengals, as we talked about, in OT in Week 5, combined 79 points in that game. Now, the one caveat I will say about this trend, totals of 52 or more points, which we're seeing tonight, 14-5-1 to the under since 2003. Now, with all of that said, it really is pretty simple. The perfect recipe for an over is when your offense is towards the top of the league in points per game and your defense at the bottom when it comes to defending the pass. And that's Baltimore. 32nd in pass yards allowed, 28th in passing touchdowns allowed, and 3rd in pass attempts allowed per game. The Ravens historically have been known for their defense, something their players take pride in, and they don't want to be last in any category.
We've been searching. I think it's been a really good response in our room of, as Kyle Van Noy said, he ain't finished last in nothing. So with that number being 32, that's not something we like. That's not something we want to be. And it's always a tough challenge, but, I think we got the guys for the job, and we're going to keep working at it all the way up until game time, and then let it loose Thursday night.
And you can see the stark contrast between the team's offense and defense. Lamar leading the league, 2nd best scoring offense, 1st in total yards. And despite all the attention being paid to this team's ground game, they rank 3rd in pass yards per game tried.
Yeah, no question about it. The Ravens are one of those few teams that has an identity and they know who they are.
Sure.
Can we say the same this season about the Cincinnati Bengals? For more on that, let's bring in our resident big man. You know him, of course, as the pride of Fort Worth and TCU. Spent 11 seasons in the league. Offensive lineman Marshall Newhouse. Marshall, for a few years now on this sort of glorious run for the Bengals, they've known what they're about. They've known who they are. They play tough defense, and then they get the points when they need them from Burrow and Higgins and Chase. But it doesn't feel like this team has a solid identity going into Week 10.
Well, at least not an identity that they can rely on to actually make a legitimate playoff push. This is a pass-first team. Listen, when you have Jamar Chase and now Mike Gesicki getting the catches and the touchdowns that he's doing in lieu of T. Higgins, but really an absence of a real run game, a defense that is streaky at best, you have an identity. It's just not necessarily a winning identity. They're top 5 in EPA per game passing in success rate. So the passing things are there. You expect them to be able to throw the ball around, but is that a winning formula long-term in the NFL? I would say no.
And not having T. Higgins, of course, is going to add injury to insult with this Bengals offense. When we look back to that Week 5 matchup, it was a classic. Of course, we know the Ravens took the W in overtime, points galore, second most combined total yards and points so far this season. When you look at both sides, how much are you taking away from that game, expecting to see the same here? And what do the Bengals have to do differently?
Well, teams that play each other this often in such a contested division, you have to learn a lot. Like, you're familiar. Teams generally do what they do. But I think the Ravens were such a different team from then till now with how they've relied on Derrick Henry, really getting him going. Listen, he had 90-plus yards in the first game, but Lamar had to throw for 4 touchdowns for them to even keep pace in this game. I don't think the Ravens want to do that to have to win. I think they want to control the line of scrimmage. I think they want to keep the pressure off of their secondary, which has struggled a lot this year. And I think they want to use Derrick Henry for the reason that they got him, is he's a finisher. You want Lamar Jackson to make good decisions, keep you in the game, make a play if he has to, but lean on a guy like Daniel Faalele, who's 6'9", 350 pounds. Wouldn't you? So I think they want to keep this thing as tight as possible and not as wide open as the first game was.
Well, Marshall, the other benefit to that is if you use Derrick Henry and go behind guys like Faalele, you're holding the ball longer, which means they don't have an opportunity to exploit that secondary.
Yep.
It's got to make people in Baltimore and the guys like Ed Reed and Ray Lewis sick to hear that the Ravens are dead last in the NFL in pass defense. Now, we talked about picking up Tre'Davious White. How much can he really change that? Because it's got to be a combination of coverage, but also getting more pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, you said it. And a corner like Trey White can only do so much. They're talented already as it is. Marlon Humphrey is already back there. Kyle Hamilton's already back there. It's not like they were lacking in talent, but the combination of a lack of a consistent elite pass rush has been affecting them. Defensive coordinator Zach Gore has been bringing a lot of pressure and exposing this secondary to a lot of man-on-man coverage and guys just running free. I mean, there's a reason they're, almost dead last in passing yards given up. And so, yeah, Trey White will be a guy that maybe you can match up. He's seen better days as a corner. He's still very serviceable, but it's a total group thing where they've got to manufacture some pressure and these things are synergistic where they work with each other. I've never seen a good secondary without a good D-line, and I really haven't seen that many good D-lines who also don't affect their secondary. So they've got a holistic defensive problem going on.
Oh, my God. Holistic and synergetic. You have hit the TCU Scrabble bingo game card for your college education.
I was just going to say, you really got Trey going with that one. All right, Marshall, what's your game pick for tonight?
I think the Bengals still have some championship pedigree. Their backs against the wall. They're on the road. It's us against the world. Give me the Bengals in a tight one.
It's going to be a tight one. And again, road wins this late in the season, Marshall, when you're that road team going on a short week, sometimes can be problematic. We've seen that play out the last 2 weeks with the better team with the better record losing because they were on the road on a short week on Thursday. Marshall, thanks very much. We appreciate it. We'll check back with you a little bit later on in this program. We are just getting started here on the Pregame Powerup. Lots to come, including taking a look at Lamar's case to become a 3-time MVP. His numbers suggest he's doing better than the last 2 times he got the award, but we'll do it going in the way back machine in the way only Emerson Latzia can put it. Pregame Power Up is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. We continue on the pregame power-up presented by Campbell's Chunky. It is soup that eats like a meal. Well, last week against Denver, Lamar was 16 for 19 through the air for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had a perfect passer rating of 158.3. That was the 4th career game for Lamar that he's had a perfect passer rating. To put that in perspective, here are the list of quarterbacks in the history of the NFL that have done that besides Lamar. No one! He has now thrown for 275 or more yards in 5 straight games, a Ravens record. He's gone 7 straight games with a rating over 100, also a Ravens record. The list goes on and on and on. Quite frankly, what we're seeing from Lamar with Derrick Henry as that hammer behind him, not much he can't do except maybe not running the ball as much as he used to because they don't need to because they've got Derrick Henry doing what he did. Now, Lamar did pop up on the injury report this week with a knee injury and missed a practice. He's off that now and good to go tonight, but take a look at his last 3 games. Attempts and yards way down. Last week against Denver, he had just 3 attempts, his fewest in a full game since week 5 of 2020 against the Bengals. Lamar says there's no reason for the lack of rushes, though, just how the game has been playing out.
I just didn't feel like I had to. Things was working in our favor. Guys were getting open, guys were catching the ball, line were protecting, running backs were catching the ball, tight ends were. Everything was just going our way, and I really didn't have to run. Only, I think, 1 scramble. Yeah, that's I had to, though. Nobody was open, so that's all.
Now, you look at the odds here. Lamar entered this week as the favorite to win MVP. He leads all qualified quarterbacks in yards per attempt to touchdown-interception ratio, passer rating, total yards, and rushing yards. By the way, his numbers this season, as we said, are better across the board than in his previous 2 MVP seasons. He also has 500 rushing yards already on this season. He's looking to become the 7th 3-time MVP in NFL history and the latest to go back-to-back since Aaron Rodgers did it in 2020 and 2021. Right now, the only knock you can have on Lamar is that he hasn't gotten it done on the biggest stage, which of course would be the postseason. For more on that, let's head back out to Baltimore, where Emerson Latzia has more on the Ravens quarterback, attempting to prove all those doubters wrong-o.
Lamar Jackson's a project. People don't think he's that bright. There's an issue with completion. Yeah. That's a problem.
Whether he will ever be a good enough passer, there's a lot of work to do there.
The Baltimore Ravens select Lamar Jackson.
I'm a Raven. It's on. All year, every year. What are they getting? Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that.
Since that fateful draft night, Lamar Jackson has won just about every trophy except the biggest one. But don't stop believing, Baltimore, because he's a walking CVS receipt of NFL accolades. Yeah, he's kind of a big deal. But before all the glitz and glamour, he was just a normal South Florida kid, balling out in Boynton Beach. And I was there to witness it all.
First quarter, Boynton up 7, Jackson's off running, jukes a pair of defenders, and see you later. Gonna bust it around the outside. Then as he approaches the goal line, you'll see a lot of him come fall.
That sultry, innocent voice you just heard calling those highlights was little old me. And it was at that moment when I realized both of our careers were destined for greatness.
Action Jackson went on a record-breaking rampage at Louisville, including a mind-boggling Heisman-winning campaign.
I'm shaking right now. I gotta get my speech up. I'm sorry.
Meanwhile, yours truly found fame and glory on the biggest small screens you've ever seen.
I
like turtles.
So it couldn't be more obvious and beautiful that our careers are peaking at the same time. And once again, tonight in Baltimore, our paths cross again. So I'm going to head in here right now and I'm going to catch up, reminisce a little bit with Lamar.
Sir, I'm sorry, you can't come any further.
Okay, but Lamar, I know Lamar from West Palm.
I'm sorry, I cannot allow you access.
Lamar, it's Emmy!
All right, so he may have been a little busy. Anywho, this season Lamar is aiming for his 3rd MVP trophy.
MVP! MVP!
Something just 6 players in NFL history have accomplished. Still, they all have one thing Lamar currently does not, a Super Bowl.
I'm not finna dwell on an MVP trophy or anything like that. I never have. I'm still trying to win these games to get to February and win in February.
So if winning a championship is all that matters to Lamar, I decided to find out, is that all that matters to Ravens fans as well? Would you trade Lamar Jackson right now if it guaranteed a Super Bowl for the Ravens this season?
Nah, you can't trade him.
Would you give up Lamar Jackson in order to win a Super Bowl this year?
Oh, hell no! Why would we do that?
He's the heart of the team.
No, I know.
Sir, would you trade Lamar if it guaranteed a Super Bowl this season for the Ravens? The man's speechless.
I guess we won't have a Super Bowl because we ain't trading Lamar Jackson. Yeah, no trade.
Would you do it?
Nope.
I truly think in the long term he's going to bring a Super Bowl regardless.
Wouldn't trade Lamar for anything.
We are not trading Lamar, quoth the Ravens fans, who hope to have the best of both worlds with Lamar winning them a Super Bowl this season. And I, for one, will never forget where that journey began.
Because you were there.
He was there. They were best friends.
He was there. Now, here's how Lamar MVP seasons compare to his current one. Just better in every category. All of these are also career highs for Lamar this season. He's the 5th player in NFL history to have at least 20 passing touchdowns and a rating of over 120 through his team's first 9 games. Each time that's happened, the QB went on to win league MVP, except for Drew Brees in 2018, who finished second. You know, and it just speaks to how much he's doing and the things that he's doing that are absolutely incredible. He has a 134.9 passer rating over his last 7 games and over 100 passer rating in each one of those games. Only 2 quarterbacks with a higher passer rating ever through a 7-game stretch in NFL history. That would be Tom Brady in the perfect regular season of 2007 and Drew Brees in 2018. So that's the level we're looking at.
Well, it's just a different conversation when we're talking MVP for Lamar Jackson, because it's always been, for the last 5 years, him leading the team in rushing and having some missing holes when it came to the passing game. But now he's not perfected, but he's playing his best when it comes to the passing game. And now you have Derrick Henry, which is why it's tough, and it was tough at the beginning of the year to argue for Lamar Jackson when Derrick Henry comes in already 1,000 rush yards, 11 rushing touchdowns. Of course, that's going to open up the passing game for Lamar Jackson. So that is the only argument against MVP.
Yeah, and by the way, those numbers for Derrick Henry, just so people understand, over 1,000 yards through 9 games and at least 10 rushing touchdowns. Last guy to do that was Sean Alexander for the Seahawks, and he went on to win MVP that
well,
year. So
there
you have 2 legitimate, Claudia, MVP candidates on the same team.
Sure, yeah.
So what are we doing now? Betting splits?
Splits, all right. Moneyline favorites.
Split it up.
Moneyline favorites went 14-1 last week. And bettors are liking the favorite again tonight on the money line. We're talking about all of these weapons and this talent for this Ravens squad, no question. 57% of the handle on the Ravens to cover, just a little less of the bets. 65% of the bets on the over, handle on the over as well. And then money line seeing even more, 76% of the bets, 66% of the handle. In terms of props, 77% of the bets on Brown under rush yards set at 60.5. Of course, that is Chase Brown, despite a 120-yard performance last week. For more on the action the book is taking tonight, here's our anonymous informant, Captain Book.
It's Thursday night and the big crab cake is already cooking. We got juicy Lamar Jackson versus Smoking Joe Cool in a shootout that's sure to determine whether the orange and black are locked into a losing season or making another run for Lombardi. Sharp bettors have staked their claim to Thursday night gold in a riding shotgun with the captain, fading the public love for King Henry and his purple flock, and bagging the 6 points with the blonde bomber. Juicy Lamar Jackson may be staring down MVP number 3, but if the Ravens are going to roll Cincy in primetime, somebody better bury Joe Burrow first. The Bengals call Ohio home, but the Cats have won the first half in 5 of the last 9 on the road. And when Jackpot Joey met Lamar at the bank back in 21, it was a 41-17 stick-up with 400-plus pass yards and 3 hot tutties. So throw some crab in the caddy and let's watch Joe Shiesty get feisty under the lights. What do you say, Joe? Let's go!
Joe Shiesty get feisty under the lights. Captain Book.
It's pretty good, man.
Loves him some Captain Book.
He does. He does. That's a good way to put it.
I think that's the best way to describe it. And we appreciate it. We appreciate it. You know who we appreciate? Mike Pritchard.
Mike Pritchard,
he joins us now from the trading floor in Las Vegas. Mike, we talked about all these numbers, right? And it's clear, and Claudia so astutely brought it up, that the reason Lamar's numbers are up because Derrick Henry is doing what he's doing. Who is the MVP in your mind on this team, let alone in the league? Is it Derrick or is it Lamar?
Well, no doubt. They need each other, right? I mean, you can make an argument for both, but it's the MVP, it's a quarterback award. We all know
Correct.
that. Lamar Jackson has 2 INTs on the entire year so far. He's instilled so much confidence with that offense as well, along with Derrick Henry. I get that, but if the Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl, it's going to be because of Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry is incredible with over 1,000 yards already, 11 touchdowns is incredible. But that offense does not need to rely on Lamar Jackson running the ball right now. So to me, that's an added benefit because now he can run when he wants to, or when the offensive coaches feel like, okay, we can scheme it to where Lamar Jackson can be very effective. We don't absolutely have to run him and put him in harm's way because we have Derrick Henry. So I think Lamar Jackson's on track right now for that 3rd MVP for sure.
And it's really hard to argue against that fact. And the Ravens as a team, you saw how far they went without Derrick Henry. Now you get him in the mix. Now you add Deontay Johnson, who was the top receiver for the Panthers. I'm really curious from your perspective as a receiver who played for 3 different teams in the NFL, being thrust in at this point in the season, how difficult is that? And how long do you expect it to take for Johnson to get sped up with things?
Not long at all, to be honest with you, Claudia. I mean, I think if you're Deontay and you see this situation that you're going to be thrusted in, like you mentioned, you're excited about it. So you're going to get in that playbook and you're going to log those long hours trying to catch up with everybody else on your team. So being inspired by Marshall Newhouse, I think it's not going to take him long to assimilate with his new teammates out there in Baltimore.
Everyone's inspired by Marshall Newhouse. Let's just be clear.
He's not even listening.
That's actually the subtitle of the show. It's the Pregame Power-Up, where everyone is inspired by Marshall Newhouse. We just don't have time to put that all on the graphic because it's too many words. All right, T. Higgins for the Bengals looks like he's not going to go. Still no official word, but it doesn't look like he's going to play. How does that change what Joe and the Bengals have to do against that, as we said, porous pass defense when they know Lamar and the Ravens are going to be putting up points?
Right. It's hard. It's difficult because T. Higgins is another #1 wide receiver out there. I mean, Jamar Chase is incredible, but T. Higgins on another team, he's a #1 wide receiver. We know that. Without his impact and certainly without his production on the field, Joe's going to have to overcompensate. So, or who else can step up and kind of have that production like a T. Higgins? I haven't found that with Cincinnati, to be honest with you. You look at Cincinnati, they're just like the LA Rams with Stafford. When Stafford has Kupp and when he has Nakua, okay, he's very dangerous, right? But without those type of receivers, they're inadequate. So now if you look at T. Higgins off the field, that offense to me loses a lot of explosiveness. So it's going to be a lot on Jamar Chase. I think they'll double him. I think also the Cincinnati Bengals could also bring pressure and apply that to that line of scrimmage on that offensive line for Cincinnati.
And we have seen Mike Gesicki at tight end step up a lot in the absence of T. Higgins. We'll get into some of those numbers later. And they're going to need everybody, right? It's the next man up mentality because Book certainly don't expect this to be too close, at least not as close as this last game in Week 5. The Ravens a 6-point favorite, and that's held pretty steady, as you know, Mike, under that key number of 7. I know you like your dogs. Is 6 enough for you for the Bengals to cover tonight?
Now, I heard you earlier, Claudia, throwing out the teaser,
there
right?
We go.
I heard that. See, now that's me. I'm all about that. But no, this is a divisional game. I know that Cincinnati is one-dimensional. Marshall mentioned that before. Their 70-30 pass-run ratio. To me, that's not going to help them out at all in this game. I mean, maybe they can make some plays. Maybe they can make some explosiveness. Jamar Chase could have a big game. Who knows? But it's a tall order to get the upset when you're one-dimensional like that. So I'm going to side with the Ravens. I love them on a teaser. I'm reluctant to lay this many points, to be honest with you.
All right, so Mike, the saying is go big or go home, but in this situation, it would be go low or go home. You take a look at 7 of the last 8 matchups between these two teams have hit the over. Are you bold enough to take the under tonight with 52.5 being the total?
I am bold enough to take the under.
Yes!
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that about you.
I'm bold enough. I'm always bold, Trey. Let's go.
I love that.
Shocking.
I love that.
I like it. A hot take from Mike Pritchard out there in Vegas on the DraftKings floor. We appreciate you. All right, coming up, what is the key to slowing down this MVP Lamar Jackson, who is possibly playing the best football of his career? We'll get you all the next-gen matchups you need to know. That's next on the Pregame Power-Up.
Pregame Power-Up is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
you on Pregame Powerup, presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup that eats like a meal, and we are joined by the Next Gen Cat.
Let's go.
For
Frisky Feline.
First touchdown scorer.
What's he got?
Let's see. Oh, little obstacle.
He's a little prancy
here.
today.
He is. What do we got? Oh, he's scared. He's scared of the cameraman. I can't read it. Who do we got? A mystery. Mystery.
Let's see who it is.
Oh,
all right, Jamar Chase.
All
right.
Plus 750. First touchdown. That's nice. Let's take a look at who the human bettors like to score tonight. Thank you, though, to the Next Gen Cat, of course. Chase Brown's up there at -115, and Jamar Chase. Those are the only ones you got to lay a little bit of juice for. The rest at plus money. Well, Derrick Henry, but please, people, don't risk $265 to win 100. I would say pretty much value, though, down the board, specifically if T. Higgins does not go, then of course Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, we may see a little bit more juice taxed on to that. For more on how people are betting tonight's game, let's head on over to DKN social media correspondent Megan Townsley.
Okay, folks, we have probably my favorite Thursday night football matchup of the season, the Bengals versus the Ravens, who we've already seen square off last month, where the Bengals fell a little short in overtime to the Ravens, but some of the bettors in the DraftKings Sportsbook betting groups are rooting for the underdog. So let's take it to the DK Network betting group, where Brian Armada, he's loving Bengals money line as a straight up bet, taking the Jungle Cats, but he also likes Chase Brown as the first touchdown scorer. That is, the first touchdown scorers are a little frightening to me, because talk about a sweat when you end up seeing Mike Gesicki hit the end zone first. I'm not making any promises. Okay, let's take it to the Bleacher Report betting group, where Ryan Ribeiro, he's fading Lamar Jackson tonight. He's taking under 233.5 passing yards, and I'm going to be completely honest, I don't like it. I can't fade Lamar Jackson. I can't do that, especially with the season he's been having, but other bettors are already tailing this bet. And if you want to be one of them, it's so easy to find these groups. Just open up the DraftKings Sportsbook, then click on the social tab at the top, and then hit betting groups. And just like other social media, you can scroll through these groups, you can comment on the post, you can like them, you can dislike them, and it's just such a fun, social, interactive way to get in on the action. So make sure you check them out before the game kicks off tonight.
Thank you, Megan. We talked about it. Henry, -265 tonight, among his top 5 shortest odds of the season to score a touchdown. Now, he did score his 100th career rushing touchdown last week against the Broncos, and he's on pace for his 3rd career rushing triple crown this season, leading the NFL in carries, rush yards, and rushing touchdowns. If you want to bet him not to score tonight, you're crazy, but you can get him at +210, Trey.
Yeah, but you're also crazy. All right, Claudia, here we go. Let's get this thing revved up with the next-gen stats you need to know for this great AFC North matchup. Let's start with that dynamic duo of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. No one, and I mean no one, is breaking more tackles than these two Ravens. Have forced a league-high 124 missed tackles this season, with Henry responsible for 60 of those. Cincinnati has been a great tackling team, though. 3rd highest efficiency this season. Had allowed the 5th fewest yards from missed tackles, so maybe they can contain them a skosh? A little bit tonight, Claudia?
Maybe a little bit. On offense, Zay Flowers has been on a tear recently for the Ravens. He's gone over 100 yards in 4 of the last 5 matchups. He's been particularly effective running seam routes this season, 3rd in yards and touchdowns on that type of route. The good news, the Bengals have had a tough time covering the seams, with the 3rd most completions and 5th most yards allowed, Trey.
Yes, absolutely. And we talk about Jamar Chase all the time. He's been everywhere for the Bengals this season, and if T. Higgins is likely going to be out, he's going to need to do that again. He's lined up all over the field, going in motion at career-high rates. The Bengals have been trying to get him lined up on linebackers. Why wouldn't they? And they did it successfully last time out against the Ravens. Chase had 3 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown when he was lined up specifically on linebackers, Claudia, in Week 5.
And continuing the Cincinnati offense conversation, the biggest beneficiary of T. Higgins being out, tight end Mike Gesicki. He has caught 22 of 27 targets for just over 280 yards and 2 touchdowns when T. Higgins has been inactive this season. A target rate of 11.3%, higher than when Higgins is on the field. Tonight, Gesicki's receiving yards prop is set at 52.5, the 2nd highest of his career and highest since Week 5 of 2021 with the Dolphins, Trey.
Claudia, all of that is true, and all of those players will factor in on the offensive side of the ball. But when it comes to defense and Cincinnati, this is the guy, Trey Hendrickson. Trey is kind of a big deal, okay? In their win last week, he used his massive wingspan to envelop the quarterback 4 times. Really almost had 5 sacks in that game. That's how close he was to getting 1 for the thumb in their win last week against the Raiders. He now leads the league with 11 sacks on the season. And if the games are usually about matchups inside the matchups, this one actually favors Cincinnati because who he's going up against is an offensive tackle that has had his issues, and that would be left tackle Ronnie Stanley. Though he didn't record a sack in their Week 5 matchup, Hendrickson generated 7 pressures on 20 rushes against Stanley. It was the second most pressure Stanley has allowed to a single player in a game in his career. And after allowing just 6 pressures through the first 4 weeks of the season, which ranked 4th fewest among left tackles, Stanley has allowed 21 pressures since, tied for the 4th most. So all of this is to say Trey Hendrickson, very good. But when asked about his individual achievements, which included an AFC Defensive Player of the Week honor last week, the Bengals' Trey said he could not care less.
Not really like a big stat guy. I like to do my job. I focus on doing my job and helping this team win. If they gave out midseason awards, that would be something that you could kind of get excited about, but they don't. There's a lot of things that were more important than looking at my own statistics. It's a team sport that gives individual achievements, so I don't want to get too caught up in that. You don't let the highs get too highs. You don't let the lows get too lows. That's the National Football League. We had a good plan. There's things we need to correct, and obviously we're going to do that on a short week.
Right now, every coach in America is saying, I love the way Trey Hendrickson answered all those questions, Claudia. After last week's performance, Hendrickson is now tied for 5th in the odds for Defensive Player of the Year. He made the biggest jump from Week 9 to now, moving from plus 3,000 to plus 1,200. The Steelers starting star T.J. Watt, the favorite, making the move after a 2-sack performance against the Giants last week.
Well, speaking of pass rushers, Trey, the Lions added 1 to their roster at the trade deadline, which we knew was coming, acquiring Zadarius Smith from the Browns for a 5th and a 6th round pick. Smith will certainly help this defensive front that lost Aiden Hutchinson to injury for the season. He immediately becomes the team's leader in pressures, according to Next Gen Stats. Here's a look at some other notable trades that went down on deadline day. These 2 teams tonight were active as well, as we've already talked about. Marshawn Lattimore went to Washington, a nice pickup for them. Jonathan Mingo to Dallas, scratching some heads. We'll talk about that a little bit later on with the Marshall. And Russell Wilson gets some help with the Jets sending Mike Williams to the Steelers.
Yeah, and it's not just that the Cowboys traded for Jonathan Mingo. It's what they traded to get Jonathan Mingo.
Yeah.
So it all is a big Jerry Jones burrito, and we'll get to it in just a little bit. As promised, for more on this, the man who is really the glue behind the entire show, Marshall Newhouse, joins us once again. Marshall, if you look at the trades that were made at the deadline, and some of them that were made before the deadline, whether it was DeAndre Hopkins to Kansas City or some of the other ones, which team do you think came out ahead the most with the moves that they made?
Yeah, I think the Zadarius Smith one makes a ton of sense just from where the Lions were and having lost the premier pass rusher and getting a guy who's maybe not his equal but can do a lot of things that he does. You can move Zadarius Smith around from position to position on the line. He's very versatile, and that's a team that's just clicking on all cylinders. But I like the Marshawn Lattimore trade as well.
Yeah.
Listen, Washington's secondary hasn't been great, but this is a team who thinks that they can just make a run right now with the way Jaden Daniels is playing, the way Cliff Kingsbury is calling games, the way everyone's performing. And so I think if he can eliminate or at least stifle one of the best receivers each game, then their defense is that much better, which makes their team that much better.
Marshall, we already touched on this a bit. The Dallas situation, Jerry Jones has been making headlines all season, as he usually does, but this season specifically, Dak was the first matter, right? That injury looking a bit worse. And now out of left field, they go get Jonathan Mingo for a 4th rounder. What was your initial reaction when you heard this?
Well, at first I was just going through the timeline, and it seemed like Dallas wasn't going to really make a move. And then you saw Jerry, it felt like late in the process, say, oh, let's go get this guy Mingo, who Panthers fans would say, yeah, you can have him for anything. Yeah. And then let alone you give up, was it a 4th or 5th round pick? And I know that there's a lot of discussion about the actual value of these picks of guys who were coming on, maybe getting in their second contract. They're not all apples to apples, I get that. But that seems like a lot of capital for a guy who isn't great on the previous team and who can't help you right now. And when most people think that you might just be selling and redoing things. But again, this is Jerry Jones. This is the Cowboys. We're used to this. If you're a Cowboys fan, you're close to putting paper bags on your heads. I don't know what else to say. This is just par for the course of things that don't make as much sense. They're late. They're uninformed, seemingly. So unless there's some magic thing that we don't see, the Mingo trade just doesn't make sense.
Well, they must have loved him in the draft process. That's the only thing you can even grasp onto here, because as you said,
they drafted well. Give them credit. They draft well. But I don't get this. It doesn't help your team now.
Yeah, and the quarterback's going on IR, so you trade for a wide receiver for your backup quarterback. It makes no sense. And this is my favorite Jerry Jones things of all time. The fact that the Cowboys gave up a 4th rounder for Mingo, which is essentially the same compensation that the Chiefs gave up for DeAndre Hopkins, says a lot about both organizations. We'll just leave that there. Now let's talk about a big injury that may be coming to a close, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Hasn't played all season because of this Achilles tendonitis in both of his feet. He's opened up the practice window now. If he comes back, how much of a threat does San Francisco become? Because you look at their roster, when they're healthy, their 1 through 53 is as good as anybody, Marshall.
Well, the fact that their record is what it is right now, and they've been as maligned as they've been, tells you a lot about the structure they have. But they are very dependent on these guys that Kyle Shanahan has handpicked, and John Lynch has handpicked, and Kyle Shanahan has specifically tailored this offense for. And so Christian McCaffrey brings so many things, versatility from the backfield. You can line him up at the slot. We've talked about that all the time. But I think from a leadership and just taking pressure off of Brock Purdy's not having the best year, especially in a contract year. And this gives them one more thing to make what is a push in a tight division in the NFC West, and an NFC that we don't think we see a very dominant team outside of Detroit. And so, they have a team of a lot of veteran leadership who know what it's like to make a run to the Super Bowl. Adding one of those guys back can only help them.
Yeah, sticking to the NFC conversation, Panthers-Giants, of course, playing in Germany Sunday. Panthers signed Chuba Hubbard to a 4-year extension. This would make sense. Sign your best player, keep him as long as you can. Yes, that's smart. The Giants have been disappointing. Of course, they have that bright star in Malik Neighbors. It hasn't been great the whole entire season. So instead of the rest of this season, let's look ahead. Who do you think has the brightest future between these two teams?
Well, that entirely depends on how much you think Bryce Young has in his tank. He showed after his benching, he had a rough start to the season. He showed some promise the last couple of weeks. I think they're trying to figure out what exactly that is. Is that something we can bank on long term or not? Because if it's not, you're tearing down and building again with this draft. With one of these top quarterbacks coming out. But if you have what you think is a guy, then the rest of your team, the holes become easier to fill. The Giants have already paid Daniel Jones, which is a nice value for a contract, but he's performing underneath that value, which is already low. And so you've tied up so much of your cap in him. I don't know where you go from here, because if you jettison him, you're starting over. You've drafted Malik Neighbors, but Joe Sheen and Brian Daboll, I think it's a rough time in New York right now, unfortunately.
Well, making rougher by the fact that Saquon Barkley is doing Super Mario 64 moves.
Right down the street.
It's unbelievable.
Right down the street.
Okay, Marshall, one thing we don't talk about enough is like how these things matter the later the season goes on. We're now into week 10, and we have a short week for the road team to get there and go to Baltimore. We've seen the last 2 weeks, the team with the better record has lost on a short week. How much more does that factor in later on in the season when you have to go on the road on a short week in week 10, 11, and beyond?
Yeah, I don't think people really understand the turnaround from a Sunday game to a Thursday game, and factor in that you're getting on a plane, having to travel however long it is. Your body's beat up. I didn't start feeling good until Thursday on a normal week. And so these guys are going to have to suit up and go on Thursday. Not to mention this division is super, super physical. And so, that's a disadvantage. And the further you get in the season, the older your team is, that has a real impact. You have to parse down most of these game plans. You have to simplify it. You're not really getting contact in the week, so you're doing a lot of walkthroughs. And so these guys, they're more prone to having runs on these Thursday night games where they just don't look too good. And it's because their bodies are still healing. Who would have thought?
Yeah, and you'll see that a lot about halfway through the third quarter going forward. That's where it usually starts to show. Marshall, as always, we appreciate it, my friend. Lots more coming here. Well, listen, you do what you can. 2 quarterbacks with very different styles, and the stats back that up. We'll give them to you when we come back in a segment we like to call the Data Dump. Pregame Power Up is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
Welcome back to Pregame Powerup, presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. As promised, we have the latest on T. Higgins. We now know inactive for tonight's game, adding to that list, like we mentioned, left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. So certainly two important positions not on the field tonight for the Bengals.
Yeah, and that the Ravens' pass secondary or defense says thank you very much. We don't have to worry about that now because we have our own issues. All right, time to finish up the show with everything we couldn't fit into this tightly information-packed 1 hour. We call it the data dump. Let's start with Baltimore. They'll be looking to tie an NFL record tonight. This I find fascinating. You talk about a team that knows who they are. The Ravens have rushed for 100 or more yards in 42 straight games. That's one shy of the record of 43 set by the Ravens from 2018 to 2021 and the Steelers from 1974 to 1977, Claudia.
That's what we call identity. How about a birdhouse? Ravens have been great at home on Thursday Night Football. That's another consistent for them. They've won each of their last 8 Thursday games at M&T Bank Stadium. The season in Baltimore, 3-1 against the spread at home, covering by an average of 8 points. A reminder, the line just 6 tonight. Games in this building are also averaging 49.5 total points, Trey.
That's surprising, and you think maybe that 52.5 should be higher when you look at that number there, right? Let's talk about Burrow as a dog. Burrow's been a very good dog throughout his career, 18-9 against the spread, 16-2 when the spread is 3 or more, which it is tonight. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson just 9-19-1 against the spread when favored by 3 or more.
Some more differences between these two quarterbacks in trends we missed. Lamar, great in the first half, 56-34-2. He's the best quarterback first half against the spread in the last 20 years. So strong start for him. Burrow is great in the second half. He's 42-25-1 ATS for a cover percentage of 63%. And one more for you. The Ravens have covered the spread in each of their last 5 games against the Bengals, Trey.
Yeah, and one thing that, look, I'm a big believer that wins and losses are not a quarterback stat.
Yeah.
Teams win games, teams win championships. But the Burrow versus Lamar Jackson thing is very fascinating. Tonight is going to be the 7th meeting head-to-head between these two quarterbacks when they're on the field. And when Lamar is quarterbacking the Ravens and when Joe Burrow is quarterbacking the Bengals, the Ravens are 5-1. In the previous, and that's the worst record for a Joe Burrow-led Bengals team against any other opposing quarterback. So there is something about this matchup that makes either Joe a little uncomfortable or Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, a little uncomfortable. Because remember, Lou Anarumo was the guy who had Patrick Mahomes on lockdown. They won 3 straight games against them, including that AFC Championship game a couple of years ago. So there's just something about this matchup that doesn't seem to feel the way it should for the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, also they don't have Derrick Henry, and Chase Brown has been a great revelation for them, stepping up for sure. But it's previous. But I'm saying this season too, right? They're just two very different storylines. The Bengals have been able to flip it around, but numbers tell a story. Both plus 145 preseason in the division, and now the Bengals even money to even make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And of course, as we know, the Ravens a heavy favorite for the division at minus 165.
Well, listen, this is basically the season for Baltimore because you're probably going to get 2 teams out of the AFC North in the postseason with the way the Steelers are playing and obviously what we expect from the Ravens. But if they lose this one to fall to 4-6 and get swept by Baltimore, then they've got to basically say we got to take down Pittsburgh twice and figure out something else, which is going to be really, really tough. And just one last thing here on Lamar so people understand what he's doing this season. He has 20 passing touchdowns and 505 rushing yards through 9 games in 2024. There are only 2 quarterbacks since the AFL-NFL merger of 1970 that have been able to do that through 9 games. One of them was Lamar Jackson in 2019 when he won his first MVP award, and the other was Randall Cunningham, sort of the predecessor of Lamar Jackson when he did it for the Philadelphia Eagles in 1990, and he finished second to Joe Montana that season for the MVP. So we'll see how it all plays out
You think
tonight.
he wins it?
Lamar?
MVP?
Lamar? If he plays like this, I think he's going to be the favorite. I would argue for Jared Goff a little, and Derrick Henry may take some of that away.
Leading QBR, completion rate, but then again, he has so many weapons around him.
Exactly. And I'm lucky to have so many weapons around me, like Claudia Bellafato, Marshall Newhouse, Emerson Latzia, everybody else on the show. Thanks for watching the Pregame Powerup, and enjoy a fantastic game.